So, I've been playing Alan Wake 2 as part of my research into the survival horror genre. Well, I've been trying to play it. The process has taken a lot longer than expected because Alan Wake 2 is one of the worst games I've ever played. This game represents everything that I despise about big-budget video games. See, I like to play video games. I don't like to watch them. I don't like to read them. If I want to sit there and have a story told to me, I got books and movies for that. The mechanics of a video game should allow me to tell my own story. But Alan Wake 2 keeps interrupting the gameplay experience to make me listen to pointless garbage that I couldn't care less about. Obviously, it's possible for a video game to be a combination of both passive and interactive storytelling. After all, I'm a huge fan of Until Dawn, so it's not like I'm saying that a game shouldn't have any non-interactive cutscenes. But if you're gonna force me to watch your game instead of play it, then you better tell me a damn good story. Alan Wake 2 does not tell a good story. And how could it when all it gives you are dry, wooden, cardboard cutout characters that are devoid of personality? To me, Alan Wake 2 is a form of torture that should be outlawed as a war crime, but I think game designers should play it as a masterclass in how not to make a game. And that's exactly what I'm doing. Whenever I feel the need to punish myself for all my sins, I play Alan Wake 2, all the while taking detailed notes on all the things I should avoid in my own works, which is everything. Now, the reception for the game was all really positive for the most part, so I'm fully aware that the problem is most likely with me, not the game. Then again, because of the sunk cost fallacy, people often have trouble admitting when a product they paid good money for doesn't live up to their expectations. Some people take it a step further and become avid fans of things they don't like just to fit in. Whatever the case may be, I was curious about what I was missing in Alan Wake 2, so I started looking up reviews. Along the way, I discovered a massive conspiracy led by Sweet Baby Incorporated to impose forced diversity quotas and destroy any game developer that doesn't conform to their woke, leftist agenda. This created an opportunity for me to do the one thing that I love doing more than anything in the world: mess with stupid white people. For a split second, I bet those hillbilly rednecks thought I was on their side. Yeah, no. Not only was Afterlife Games founded specifically to improve diversity within the video game industry, we believe that the only way to achieve that goal is the complete eradication of all white people on the planet. But let me clarify, when I say white people, I'm not necessarily referring to people of European descent. See, in my eyes, a white person is anyone who perpetuates the ideals of white supremacy, and that has nothing to do with what you look like. There are plenty of brown-skinned individuals who disagree with what I'm about to say. They're easy to spot, too, because they all start their comments with, "as a brown person," then they proceed to say some idiotic bullshit. To me, these dumbasses would also be classified as worthless, good-for-nothing white people. In other words, you're not born white, you earn that title by being human garbage. Now, obviously, the majority of white people are of European descent, but that doesn't mean that all people of European descent are white. Like, okay, say you're Irish, right? Hell yeah, dude. I fucking love Lucky Charms. Or maybe you're French. Nothing wrong with that. Le Big Mac. Jokes aside, I think the histories and cultures of European countries should be embraced and celebrated. But the only history that white people have is a history of ignorance. And the only culture they're associated with is barbarism. So for anyone to want to identify as white instead of the culture they actually belong to, that shit is disgusting. So if you're a person of European descent, and assuming you're not filling out a form where white is the only option they give you, I encourage you to embrace your actual heritage instead of being a mistake. So in case there was any confusion, yes, I am racist against white people. If it's at all possible to be such a thing, sign me up. I'm so done with white people, FF7 Rebirth could be the greatest game ever made, but I'm not interested because I'm sick and tired of games where you play as a blonde-haired, blue-eyed colonizer. Report the video. No, I want you to report it. And when nothing happens as a result of your cries of anguish, maybe you'll finally start to realize that you're an embarrassment to all of humanity. All that said, I completely understand how someone could be radicalized by the cult of the cracker, because as it turns out, white people don't have the ability to process factual information. They have no reason to. For centuries, the media has perpetuated the idea that the default protagonist is an able-bodied, heterosexual Caucasian male, and anyone who doesn't fall into that specific demographic is treated as a deviation from what's normal. This gives white people such a deep sense of entitlement that they walk through life knowing, not thinking, but knowing that their thoughts and opinions are always correct. Their cognitive dissonance makes them completely immune to anything that might negate their point of view, and that just reaffirms the idea that white makes right. Imagine all the heroes in your favorite games and movies always looked like you when you were growing up, and every single day you were told that everyone who looks like you is born with the authority to decide which direction the world spins. You would get drunk off of that kind of power. Now imagine someone who looks like you and therefore has the same power you have comes along and tells you that there's a conspiracy to take that power away from you. You'd believe it without question, because who wouldn't want to be in your position? And naturally, the idea of having your power taken away terrifies you, because you know how those without power are treated. And the reason you know that is because you're the one who treats them that way. But a conspiracy implies that there's some secret organization operating in the shadows. There can't be a conspiracy if I tell you directly to your face that the goal of this company and the products we create is the total annihilation of white people. Not in a violent way, of course not. The only way to de-honkify the honky is through education. Then again, considering how angry white people get when you try and teach them something, maybe things will get violent.
Fucking pronouns!
Alright, so Sweet Baby Incorporated is one of the dumbest names for a company I've ever heard, so for the rest of the video I'm just gonna call them SBI. But that's not exactly an improvement, cause now it's the initials for irritable bowel syndrome backwards. Point is, I wouldn't want their name or logo printed on anything that I'm associated with, and I bring that up to say that I'm not on their side or biased towards them in any way, I'm just reporting facts. According to their website, SBI is an inclusion-focused narrative and consultation studio. And what does that mean exactly? Basically, when a developer like Remedy decides to tell a story with a character from an underrepresented background like Saga Anderson, they can hire SBI to help prevent the character from coming across as stereotypical or offensive in any way. So, in response to being reminded of the existence of people who aren't them, a bunch of white people formed an angry mob in the form of a Steam curator page known as SBI Detected. The purpose of this curator page is to list any games that SBI consulted on to discourage other white people from buying them. The creator of SBI Detected says that the purpose of the page is just to inform people so they can make their own decisions about the games listed. But if the point was to inform people, then all the games would be labeled with the informational review type. Instead, every single game is tagged "Not Recommended." Interestingly enough, the creator of SBI Detected is the perfect example of a white person who's not of European descent. The dude is Brazilian, and even though most Brazilians are descended from the Portuguese, white people do not think of Brazilians as fellow white people. White people see Brazilians as another type of Mexican. And if you think what I just said is offensive, you're correct, because white people will never advocate for a Brazilian protagonist over some blonde-haired, blue-eyed Cloud Strife-looking dude. You gotta appreciate the irony. The creator of SBI Detected is a figurehead in a movement that wants to keep his own people out of video games. And that's the weird thing about all this. The people who argue the loudest against diversity and inclusion are the ones who would benefit the most from it. This right here is irrefutable proof that white privilege exists. And white privilege is so powerful that oppressed people will rush to the aid of their oppressors to preserve it, all because they don't want to relinquish the fantasy of pretending to be someone who has it. You think they heard me? No, I don't think they did. Let me say it another way. All black and brown-skinned people inherently know where they stand on the totem pole of society, at the bottom. And that's why some of them oppose diversity in the media. Because to them, playing as a Caucasian in a video game is the only chance they'll ever get to be on top. You think that's depressing? Oh no. This situation is more sinister than you could ever possibly imagine. You know who the most devout Bible-thumping Jesus freaks on the planet are? They're not white people, they're poor, uneducated minorities. That's because the colonizers forced their religion onto the places they invaded, and anybody who didn't conform got executed. So to protect their families, parents began teaching their kids to praise Jesus without question. Over time, that unwavering devotion became ingrained into the culture until anybody who wasn't possessed by the Holy Spirit was seen as the enemy. But as generations passed, everybody forgot that the reason they had to wake up early on Sundays used to be a matter of life and death. It's the same thing with black and brown-skinned people who don't want characters who look like them in the games they play. They've been beaten into submission by colonizers for so long that now they're all experiencing collective Stockholm syndrome. An argument that racists like to use is that skin color shouldn't matter, and you should be able to relate to a character regardless of what they look like. And they really think they're being insightful and enlightened when they bring this stuff up. Thing is though, if skin color really didn't matter, they would keep their stupid fucking mouths shut when they saw a person of color in a video game. This is where the white man's double standard comes into play. Minorities aren't supposed to complain about skin color when a character looks European, but white people are allowed to complain when a character doesn't. And again, they believe that the default human being is a Caucasian male, so when a character like Saga Anderson comes along, they see that as deviant behavior. The only way she could represent forced diversity was if you thought it was unnatural for people to exist in that state. That's why white people have trouble empathizing with characters like that, because it's impossible to relate to anything that you view as being less than human. The issue, though, isn't about being able to simply relate to the characters you see on screen. Any story is going to have a universal message that applies to pretty much everybody, and every protagonist is going to have a goal that can be categorized into a basic human need: money, love, power, or just plain old survival. So regardless of a character's appearance, all characters are relatable on a basic level. But when a character is from a certain background, the people in the audience who share that origin story can relate to that character on a much deeper level than someone who doesn't. Like, I can try my best to understand what it's like to be paralyzed from the waist down, and I can acknowledge how difficult a paraplégic's life might be, but I don't really know what that's actually like. For someone who does know, seeing a character in a similar situation can elevate a story to a higher plane of existence, assuming the character isn't a harmful stereotype. So it's not about relatability, it's about wanting to connect more deeply to the media you enjoy on a cultural level. And something that more people need to understand is that there's a common culture that's shared by everybody who isn't a white, able-bodied, heterosexual male. A culture of being seen as abnormal in the eyes of white people. Oddly enough though, because of the sheer volume of Caucasian characters in the media, it really is strange to see a minority protagonist. Whether consciously or subconsciously, when a writer or an artist sits down to create the leading role for their story, they're more likely to envision that character as being someone of European descent. And that's why diversity has to be forced, until Eurocentrism can be completely deprogrammed out of society, and characters like Saga Anderson are no longer seen as aberrations. Some of the members of SBI Detected say they play games to be entertained, not have an agenda shoved down their throats. To them, games are a chance to escape reality, and they want companies like SBI to stop forcing them to engage with real-life politics. But white people use politics as a synonym for strange concept that would require me to expand my worldview to understand, but growing as a person frightens me, so fuck that shit, and fuck anybody who reminds me of how bad I am at grasping new ideas.
Fucking pronouns!
There's that double standard again. Making a game with a black female protagonist is pandering to minorities, and you shouldn't do that, but it's perfectly fine to pander to white people by making sure that games don't challenge them emotionally or intellectually. Actually, since we're talking about double standards, you might be wondering why I can say that the world would be better off without white people, but if a white person said the same thing about black people, they'd get their ass beat, whether physically or metaphorically. That's because white people will straight up admit that they don't want games to be more inclusive because that would force them to think. And nobody wants to be around somebody who's proud of how seldom they use their brain. Most of the time though, when white people explain why they're against diversity and inclusion, they get banned on whatever platform they post on for being racist pieces of shit. Inflammatory hate speech didn't start getting people banned on the SBI Detected discussion forums until they were at risk of being shut down if the vitriol continued. But before that, their Discord server was a haven for all the neo-Nazi Klansmen on the internet. Some people think that SBI Detected should be given a platform because of freedom of speech or whatever. And okay, I guess. But understand that SBI Detected is a white supremacist hate group. Because if you don't speak out against discrimination the moment you see it, even if you don't engage in it directly, you're still giving it a space to thrive and flourish. That makes you complicit. You're guilty by association. So as far as I'm concerned, every single member of SBI Detected is a hood and robe wearing David Duke wannabe. Again, I'm not talking about Caucasians or people of European descent. When I say white people, I'm specifically referring to white supremacists, something that I refuse to tolerate in any form or fashion. You don't tolerate cancer cells. You don't tolerate flesh-eating bacteria. When a group like SBI Detected makes it clear that they don't want you to exist, you don't listen to what they have to say and negotiate. You go to war. Freedom of speech. Freedom of speech my motherfucking ass. I was supposed to talk about Alan Wake 2, but obviously I've spent most of the video complaining about white people, so allow me to remedy the situation. I wasn't exactly looking forward to playing Alan Wake 2, but I was definitely interested in the game, specifically because of Saga Anderson. If Alan Wake was the only playable character, I probably would have skipped this game completely. Not because he's of European descent, but because he sucks, on top of being of European descent. Saga Anderson is Remedy's second female protagonist, but she's their first ever protagonist of color. Although technically, the character's still of European descent. Ah well, can't win them all, I guess. Either way, I was really impressed that a Finnish studio decided to create a black protagonist. Apparently, only 1% of Finland's population is of African descent, so the chances of a Finnish person even meeting a real-life black person are ridiculously slim. So even though I applauded Remedy for trying to make the games industry more inclusive, I was more than skeptical that they'd succeed. Remedy was even skeptical of themselves, which is why they hired SBI to help make sure that Saga wouldn't offend anybody. But with a character this bland, I don't see how it's possible for her to be offensive. I'm inclined to blame the writers at Remedy for this because Alan Wake is also a boring-ass, milquetoast-ass, drier-than-Death Valley-ass character. And so was Jesse Horseface Fadden in Control. So clearly, when it comes to characters, these guys are not the Remedy. But isn't storytelling specifically what SBI was supposed to help with? Well, not necessarily. The truth is, consultants don't actually have to contribute anything. They just offer advice, then the studio decides whether or not to take it. Say a developer made a game with a marginalized character that wound up being an offensive stereotype. All that developer has to do is show that they consulted with an outside source like SBI. Theoretically, this would alleviate them from the fury of the woke mob, since they technically performed their due diligence and tried to not offend anybody. In the case of Alan Wake 2, I'm sure SBI did the best they could with what they were given, but the problem is that what they were given was Alan Wake 2. As the old saying goes, you can polish a turd till it shines, but it still ain't gonna be nothing but a goddamn piece of shit, I tell you what. I tell you what. I tell you what. Now I could list everything I hate about Alan Wake 2 for days on end, but I'm not a critic, so I don't like to complain about something without offering a solution for how to fix it. But doing that would double the length of the video, and like I said, all I'm really trying to do here is piss white people off. And that's not difficult to do either. Their emotions are more fragile than a snowflake. That's actually the best way to describe it. If any white people out there are somehow still watching, thanks for the ad revenue. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Also, be sure to check out the link to the Patreon in the description. Until next time, stay woke.